Thanks everyone for being here today to listen to my talk on technology and accessibility in the field. I'm really sorry I can't currently be there. I'm actually out in Tenerife studying volcanoes. My name is Frankie Butler, and I'm a volcanologist with a physical disability, and I've just graduated from the University of Aberdeen. I thought it best to start the story right from the beginning. When I was very young, at the age of 4, I became really interested in volcanoes, so much so that I would take rocks to show and tell at preschool. My grandparents then took me to see Mount Etna, and I got to stand in a volcanic crater. This was just fantastic. This passion only grew with time, and I saved up all my money and took myself to see Mount Tongariro in New Zealand. This then took me to studying at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, where I got to experience some incredible field trips across the Isle of Skye, the Highlands, and even just surrounding Aberdeen, the amazing Stonehaven. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that I was actually standing and walking about in the previous videos. Well, I was an elite athlete, and unfortunately a wayward stick put an end to that. Accidents do happen on the hockey pitch, and you're always aware of that, it's always in the back of your mind. Unfortunately, this one was quite a major one, and I ended up having to have reconstructive surgery after tearing all the ligaments in my ankle. This surgery left me with a very rare condition called complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS for short. This is a maladaptive response of the neurological system that causes you to be in pain 24/7. So, since February 2019, I've been on wheels and on crutches, and it's been a very, very difficult past 4.5 years. This has meant that field trips have been really quite challenging. I've had to be quite creative with how I get to be involved. Unfortunately, I've missed out on a lot of really formative field trips, one of which was to the Isle of Arran, or as most folk call it, Scotland in miniature. I'm really sad that I missed that experience, and I really hope I'll get to go back and visit there one day. It's important as a young geologist to try and see as many rocks as you can. And historically, a lot of those field trips that allow you to see those rocks have been incredibly inaccessible, meaning that folk like myself with physical disabilities have not been able to access them. So, 2 years down the line, I've not really seen too many rocks, and I'm meant to be a geologist. So I did what any well-meaning young person does and went on Twitter and asked around. I was lucky to hear of a program called Geospace out in Arizona with the University of Florida, run by Dr. Anita Marshall and her team. This takes disabled students with both physical and sensory disabilities out into the field and allows us to access things we would otherwise not have access to. So, how do you get a bunch of folk with different disabilities to access the field, you ask? Well, I had that same question too. There was always the worry that this would just be held together by duct tape and a dream, or that it's virtue signalling, and I'm so glad to say that it's not. So you're a physically disabled student in the field. Your first question is, how am I going to see the rocks? Sometimes you're greeted by beautiful clear paths like the one you see in the video right now. Other times you really can't access what you need to see, and you've got to use alternative methods. One of those methods is live streaming. So myself and Sean are sat here cozy in a tent away from the difficult conditions outside. We've got an able-bodied student out in the field collecting data for us, but they're actually wearing a GoPro. And this means they can live stream what they're seeing directly back to either our phone or, as you can see in the video there, actually a computer jerry-rigged together by a cardboard box and duct tape. Another piece of technology that we utilised hugely in the field was drones. So we don't always get this beautiful Grand Canyon-esque vibe where you can sit on the edge of a canyon, look down and see absolutely all the geology, even from a seated position. So we use the drone, and this is pretty straightforward, far more straightforward than I originally thought. You plot the route manually on your phone, or you can follow pre-planned flight paths, and you just press go pretty much. And you've got to make sure the weather conditions are right. And we are very lucky that in Arizona, the wind levels were low enough to allow me to fly the drone. So I got to fly a drone for the first ever time, and I was so excited. Not only was the drone footage useful for me, but it was actually incredibly useful for the rest of the team. It is so easy to get lost in the micro context of the rocks that you're looking at. Having a regional view really helps you to zoom out and see the bigger picture, quite literally and figuratively. The use of drones allowed myself and Sean to actually be an incredibly useful part of the team. We weren't just sat on the sidelines, because that's not what it's about. It's about contributing and being a part of the team. Drone footage has many wide ranging uses, one of which is to create 3D models. Another is just a fantastic teaching tool, for if the weather's bad, you can't actually get out there on that particular day, you can show your students some drone footage from a previous better weather day. It's also just great for getting a global context of what you're actually looking at close up microscopically in your particular strata. The innovation and accessibility of drone technology has allowed folk like myself and Sean to access the field. We can see things that we otherwise would have no chance of seeing, and we can actually contribute hugely to science. I cannot express just how valuable the use of drone footage was in Arizona. When you're in a wheelchair, you have quite a different perspective from those that are standing. As you can see here, I'm sat on a chair, and the video on the right, which will now look on the full screen, is actually all that I could see of the area I needed to look at. The next image is actually one that my field assistant took for me. Can you see that I really couldn't actually access so much of the field there without the drone or without a fellow field assistant? Geology and geoscience have often been seen as the sciences that require heavy walking in difficult terrain in really, really hard field conditions. However, that is actually changing. The use of drones helps not only those that are disabled, but it helps everyone. A nice example of drone footage that helped everyone was here at SP Crater. This is quite a long slog if it's a hot day, and it was always incredibly dry. So we set a drone up, and we also gave someone a GoPro strapped to their chest. So that meant that myself and Sean at the bottom of the hill didn't have to wheel all the way up. We also didn't miss out. We were part of the communication, the live stream was working, and we also got samples brought back down, so we helped piece together the geological history of the area. What Geospace set up was this fantastic virtual students, mission control, and ground team exploration. This allowed so many more people to be included in fieldwork that would have otherwise been completely excluded. Having a mission control also meant that when we were actually out in the field, we were far more targeted and our time was spent far more usefully. And this meant that no one got exhausted, no one went off track, and we actually focused and did a proper scientific exploration of the area. So, how do we make it work over here in an area that is far wetter, far muddier, and has far fewer courses that are actually accessible? By that I mean many of the generation old paths that are used to access field sites are quite difficult terrain and are quite undulating and probably not the most accessible on paper. So we went to the drawing board, and myself and a team of lecturers at the University of Aberdeen, we recreated field trips that used to be about a lot of walking up some very steep hills. However, the amazing thing about geology is that there's often more than one outcrop, showing what the lecturers need to show us to fulfill the teaching criteria. Using Google Earth and the knowledge of the area, we found some road cuttings that are fantastic. We found areas that we could access via slipways and ancient fishing villages. And I got to see some world-class geology like the Laxford Cut shown in this video. We also found that working in a team as geologists, people are always so willing to help one another. We had a fantastic volunteer called Rachel Gibson, who was one of the students, and she was really, really keen to film the area using her GoPro on a chest strap. This meant I could actually see areas that I had no chance of getting up to, and this helped me put together the story of the Scottish Highland geology, which, as I'm sure folk that know it, it's very complicated, so this really, really helped to get an idea about what I was actually seeing in front of me. As you can see from the footage, we had some quite soggy days up here in the Highlands. This was up in Tongue. Now, I went to try and see some stromatolites over there and I couldn't quite reach them. So again, we just took the GoPro and this was live streamed to me on my phone because the app connects to it. This was really helpful and a very cheap way of allowing folk to access areas that would be inaccessible. So drones in Scotland, is that really possible? Well, yes. If you plan it with a good weather window, you can fly a drone. One of our lecturers here at the University of Aberdeen, Dr. Jess Pugsley, and her colleague Professor John Howell, pioneered the use of drones in field trips. So she actually flew this for us during our trip to the Islay Beach in Fife, which is a very complex diatreme. and all students benefited from seeing the area from the air. Without the unwavering support of my incredible lecturers at the University of Aberdeen's Geology and Geophysics department, there is absolutely no way that we would have found a place for me on these field trips. I am so, so proud to say that I have completed my degree at the University of Aberdeen, and I did so with an amazing team around me. I'm so happy that I got to be a part of these field trips because they are a lot more than just a learning experience. The camaraderie, the back and forth banter, the learning that you get to have amongst one another when you're arguing over what this rock is, what this fossil is, all those little things you really miss out on when you're left out to the side or left to work by yourself in a room because you're not able to actually access the field. I think I really had the most inclusive experience I could have had in these notoriously inaccessible places. The use of technology and drones, and even just taking pictures on your phones, allowed me to see things that I would not have had any chance to see. And I really thank all the volunteers for taking their time to go for little wombles with that on their chest, for taking pictures and regional drone footage. Please do reach out to me on the QR code scan that will follow shortly. I really hope that this has inspired you to think about ways you can include folks with disabilities. Thank you.